I have had thousands of conversations with many men over time. However, I can only think of a few of these who have had such an impact on my life. The conversation that you're going to hear in this episode originally aired on October 28th, and it took my beliefs that I had from movies on the big screen into a place of reality. We all know the movies I am referencing, like Taken, or even the more recent movie, The Sound of Freedom. While there are some cases that are extreme, like in these examples, most of the silver screen trafficking narrative is a bunch of lies. Funny story though, even though the stories in those movies are exaggerated or completely BS, movies like The Sound of Freedom opened my eyes to something different, something that I knew I needed to explore. At the same time, I had been seeing this guy pop up on my LinkedIn feed, someone that I saw doing awesome stuff, awesome work out there in the field. But he really had this aura of caring about protecting the MVPs, as he refers to the most vulnerable people. And that is when I reached out to Kevin Metcalf. And this man totally opened my eyes to the real world of human trafficking and exploitation. But then he further opened my eyes to real work by real human beings and what they're doing to combat these atrocities and trafficking and exploitation. This one interview is what led to tremendous 12-part series on this topic that would have never come into existence without this man intervening in my life at that moment. Now, on a personal level, it has also led to a wonderful friendship with Kevin, as well as some other real American heroes. Now, if you don't know who Kevin is, it's time for you to change that. I want you to go out there and I want you to follow him today online so that you can see what a real hero in action looks like. Kevin, I love you, brother. But first, let me share an important message from a friend of mine.
Hey, it's Tyler from Cross to Bear. I just wanted to go ahead and take time to say it's December. We're having a concert April 12th, 2023 with Disciple and Decipher Down. But in honor of Jesus' birthday, this whole month, or the first 500 tickets are going on sale right now for $5 off. Eventbrite, search Darkness Will Fall, Fayetteville, North Carolina. And any help we can get, thank you.
You could probably go to the chief of police of that city or the sheriff of that county or whatever the legal structure is. Go to the head of that municipality or that agency and ask them how many cars were stolen last month, or last week, how many break-ins did you have, how many residential burglaries, how many commercial burglaries. If you ask them about stuff, then they're going to be able to give you numbers. If you ask them how many kids were trafficked around here, no idea. How many kids are missing? Probably not going to be sure about that. How many foster kids are not where they're supposed to be right now in your jurisdiction? No clue. That, we measure what we value in our society. And I can tell you by what I see, we're not measuring kids. We're not measuring childhood. We're really not aware of it. We don't want to be aware of it because it's unpleasant.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Fire Forge Leader podcast. Today we have Kevin Metcalf on. Kevin is the CEO of the National Child Protection Task Force. We're going to talk about some sensitive topics today, but we're also going to wrap this up at the tail end with some actions that parents and society can use and be taken away. But first, we're going to start off with a little bit of background, how Kevin got into this field, where he really came from, and why he's got a passion around this Child Protection Task Force. So welcome, Kevin, to the podcast. Really appreciate you coming on. Like I told you beforehand, I am really called to this mission right now and trying to do, something, and really getting in front of the camera is what I'm decent at. So that's why we're here today. So welcome, Kevin, and I appreciate you being on, brother.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And this is something that's very important in our fight, is raising awareness and getting the word out.
So with that being said, Kevin, can you give us a little bit of your background, where you came from?
Yeah, and I want to also make an adjustment there. I have just resigned as the CEO of the National Child Protection Task Force, and I've moved over to the Sentinel Foundation. Next, I'm wearing your shirt. The Sentinel Foundation is it's a very, very close sister organization to the NCPTF. Matter of fact, Glenn Devitt, one of the co-founders of Sentinel, is essentially one of the founding members of the NCPTF. I mean, we couldn't have made that without him. So he and I have been very, very close in this fight since well before either of these organizations were put together. But I made that transition so I could. I tend to be a full tilt, very aggressive person in a lot of ways, and I wanted to keep expanding. So with Sentinel Foundation, they've got a bunch of people that come from the special operations community. A lot of them are retired, and quite a few of them are from Delta Force. And they have this mentality of, well, you have to show up, you got to earn your place every day. You don't just get a job. If you stop earning your place every day, you got to find another job. So I kind of like that. I like the challenge, and I like that there's a bunch of other people with the same mindset that I've got. NCPTF is great organization, great volunteers. I think they just wanted a little more reasonable mission to go after. I'm ready to expand and go after something bigger. But my background goes into, I went through basic training in the Army in 1988. And as you can tell from the beard, I've been around for a long time in one uniform or another, state, local, federal law enforcement. As a matter of fact, I left federal law enforcement, went to law school as a single dad. The girl's mom died many, many years ago. So I had them by myself since they were 2 and 5. And I was out of the country on Thanksgiving night, and my overnight babysitter called and said, "Hey, I can't be there tonight." So after that, I thought, man, I can't do this to my girls, overnight babysitters, raising them, and neighbors and whatever. So I left there, went to law school, and I've been a prosecuting attorney for about 12 or 13 years. And it was as a prosecutor when I went from working terrorism stuff to the exposure to technology and what it does to our children. And that was an eye-opener for me. That was where that was what really got my attention. And suddenly terrorism wasn't that important to me anymore. It was mainly about kids and our most vulnerable people out here, our MVPs, most vulnerable people. Technology allows us a way to hide what we're doing. And that really became a passion in my life. So if you follow me on social media, you'll see recently I put out an article, because I keep getting asked this question, how do you become this? One of them was a case, and we fought this thing. I was a prosecutor, and with several defense attorneys, because this guy would keep firing them and moving on to another one. So we had several resets for various reasons, but at the end of that, he got a conviction. He got 540 years, but he was very, very close to slipping through the cracks. And this was a guy who moved here from Michigan. He was a registered sex offender up there, changed his last name. He got married and he took his wife's last name, trying to hide off the radar what wasn't registered, and was actively looking for children. And he already had his collection built his new wife just happened to walk by a computer one time and saw what was on his computer, and she turned him in immediately. So, it kind of went from there. But that awareness that this is happening, and we're really not doing a very good job of this on the investigation side because technology advances so rapidly. So that became my mission of how do we do this faster? How do we do it more efficiently? And how do we prosecute this after we get it done? So that was the whole thing that led me to go into the NGO space.
That's amazing. So you went from prosecutor, and that, led you into all of this technology and that sort of thing. So what kind of technology are people using in, trafficking and child abuse and, this sexual exploitation of children? Is it one, the dark web, as everybody talks about, or is it across multiple platforms, or how does that work?
Well, one of the key pieces are these things, right? Just a cell phone, what you carry around every day. And
Right.
it doesn't have to have cellular service either. It's going to be a Wi-Fi only. You can find plenty of Wi-Fi out here that you don't have to pay for. But what do we see? So the primary things that we're involved with right now with Sentinel, let's just start with human trafficking. That's been the big buzzword for a long time. So human trafficking is, and I'm not going to use legal definitions. I'm just going to make this very straightforward. Human trafficking is when you're coercing somebody else to do a job. And that's usually you get sex trafficking, you get labor trafficking, but you're taking somebody and using them as a commodity. It's like drugs, except, we've all heard this before. You can sell drugs once, you can sell a person many, many times. And that works sex or labor. So in order to find the Johns or to find the buyers in this market, you have to make this easy for them to find you. That's where we get sex ads. So if you get on, I don't even know if I want to name any of the sites or not, but if you get out here and you start looking at sex ads, that is where you find an email, a phone number, you find some way of communicating with that, whoever it is behind the ad. And you set up a meeting and you set up payment. That's how that works. So that has to be done on what's referred to as the clear web, the Google web. Anything you can go on in Google. The second thing that we work is child exploitation. We have people in my community have gone after this word for so long, this term anyway, and the statutes still refer to this as child pornography. But this is not pornography. This is nothing but child rape, child sexual abuse imagery. It's horrible. Some of them are infants. And if you think the rape of an infant is pornography, there's something wrong. But so, we talk about human trafficking, got to find the buyers. The exploitation side is primarily dark web because the dark web allows you to hide. So the Onion Router, the Tor network, and there are some other ones, but the very nature of that allows bad guys to hide. It has some good things too. So with technology, there's always the good, but you can use whatever is good, you can turn it around and use it for something really, really bad. And that's what we see. So on the bad side of this are people selling actual rape videos, snuff videos. We see animal cruelty, almost anything you can imagine. You want to buy ghost guns, you want to buy credit cards, fake IDs, all this is on the dark web. But it's not as easy to navigate. You kind of have to know where you're going and how to get through that system. It's not easy. If you were trying to sell something on that people had to work for, they're just going to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go to Amazon, back on the clear web. So the sexual or the child exploitation side of this is primarily dark web. And that makes finding them really, really difficult. But we primarily see that these rape videos and these images are a commodity in and of themselves. So they will be actively traded with others. And everybody's always looking for something new. So you'll often hear a reference of first generation CSAM, child sexual abuse material. So first generation is anything that is created that has not been identified, logged, hashed, and it's in somebody's database. So, and quite honestly, with kids today, we're seeing a lot of self-generation. People kids taking pictures of themselves. A lot of times during the grooming process, when somebody else is asking them to do that and provide that imagery to them. Another thing we see in technology is sextortion. And if that's not on a parent's radar, it really, really should be. And so there's financial sextortion, which usually hits boys primarily. And this has been going on for a long time, many, many years. I can remember this years ago, where, let's see, you're on social media, right?
Yes,
How
sir.
many young women in bikinis have tried to friend you and then communicate with you? You ever seen that?
So I've just recently joined TikTok because one of my
Right.
coaches told me that I need to be on TikTok, and I want to get the hell off from it because of all of it. I mean,
Yeah.
It's like the third video, it seems like.
Yep. So you get hit with these, and these young men that are developing, their self-esteem often is low. Now they got a pretty girl talking to them. They move on to doing things and taking care of business on just like we're talking here, and they'll do masturbate or whatever it is, and then the next thing they know is they get something delivered to them, email or whatever. Open it up, and there's this video of them doing their thing with a message saying, here's your friends list. Here's this information. I know who your family is. I know who your friends are. If you don't send me $500 by gift card, then I'm going to release this to everybody. And that's the sextortion side. With a lot of young women, or a lot of women, what we'll see is they'll have the financial also, but a lot of times with them, they're going to say, all right, if you don't want this released, you got to send me more. I want more. I want more videos. I want to see you doing this. And there are various ways that this happens. But the sextortion side of this, there has to be some leverage generally. And for some kids, this can be AI generated. So some of these predators out here will take imagery, videos, or whatever that they find, and they will alter them to make it look like this person is doing something bad or something immoral or some sex act. And they will send it back to them and say, if you don't pay me money, or if you don't send me real stuff, I'm going to release this. We also see, and before we started recording, I said, I can probably find your password. So for your viewers out here who reuse passwords, they oftentimes, a lot of these criminals will, let's say, run across an attractive girl on TikTok, find her name. If I find her name, I figure out where she's at. I can probably find her email history. If I can find her emails and her information, I could probably tell you a password. If I can tell you that password, I can probably log into TikTok, Snapchat, Google, something. Once I do, I'm probably going to find images that she doesn't want broadcast out to everybody, and you can see where this is going. And there's that's leverage, right? And then a fourth, and not really final, but a fourth of the top ones for me is what the French refer to as rape by proxy. So again, there's a fully encrypted app, something like what we're doing now. You can talk to another person somewhere else, usually in the Philippines or some extremely poor country. On this fully encrypted app, normally they're not recorded, so there's no evidence left over, but I'm going to say, I'm going to pay you $15 if you do this to that child while I watch. And all we see are just a list of transactions on MoneyGram, Western Union, PayPal, whatever it may be. We can just see all these very small transactions that are occurring. And working on those is extremely difficult. You're looking at fully encrypted apps, and the top 3 countries are men in the US, UK, and Australia. Those are the top 3 consuming countries of this. And also there's sex tourism, which this oftentimes leads itself into, where men from, usually men with money, or that have some resources. They don't always have money, but they have money to travel. They'll go to Thailand, they'll go to Philippines, they'll go somewhere so they can have sex with children. So we have sex tourism, which is another one. But you can see how this broadens out really fast, right?
Oh, for sure. So just to recap, the 4 that you mainly work on is trafficking, which is any time when the people are traded as a commodity.
Right. They're being sold.
Exploitation. Remind me what the difference in between exploitation and sextortion is.
All right. Let's say you and I are. I'm a trafficker. You're a buyer. Well, you want to physically show up and have sex with one of my people, right? So the exchange is going to be money. You're going to give me cash, money. If you and I are predators on the exploitation side, you're interested in getting the videos or getting images, especially if it's something you don't have. It's something that's valuable to you or something that fits into your weird, whatever you like. And that is traded as a commodity itself. So the images and video, it's not an exchange of cash, it's an exchange of imagery.
So that's where the first edition or
first generation CSAM or something that's harder to get. But once your images are out there, it's what we have to keep hammering into our children, and not only our children, everybody. Once you send an image out, you really don't have an expectation of privacy in that anymore.
Dang. This is just, I mean, to me, it's just amazing because we think in all these little boxes, the common person just thinks in these little boxes. There's trafficking. I remember when I used to believe that it happened to, lower class citizens or around busy highways or at truck stops or whatever, right? But what you just explained to me is it can happen to anybody anywhere.
Right.
So with that being said, is there any commonalities between these things that people can watch out for?
Well, there's a lot of overlap between the crimes. There's a lot of connections there. And it's just basically you have people who are willing to take advantage of the suffering of other people for their own benefit. Now, having said that, that's not easy to identify. That's not something you can just look at somebody else and say, oh, they're obviously a trafficker. So if I showed you pictures of some of the people that we've worked and some of the cases I've worked, you would never imagine who they were really and what they did. So you really have to look for more behavioral red flags, and that's not always easy, especially in modern society. I mean, how often do you go hang out at your neighbor's house, or how often do you go? It's not like when we grew up. I knew everybody in my neighborhood. I would go to everybody's house. We'd hang out. It was a little different. With modern society, people are moving in, people are moving out. We really don't get to know anybody anymore. It doesn't seem like, maybe, but getting to know somebody and getting to get a feel for things. So it may be something of, if you see somebody that has a child, maybe different children that they are showing. Let's say you work at a hotel and you see a guy show up with a young girl. Maybe it's his daughter. Because I was a single parent and I had two little girls. So I was always that weird guy standing outside the ladies' restroom holding a bunch of toys and stuff. That's something weird, and I get it. But I was not letting my kids out of my sight, so I was right there. So, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right?
Right.
You have other things where, let's say that guy shows up again with a different girl. Shows up a few weeks later with a different girl, and there are patterns that we can look for. And let's say he shows up and you ask her a question. If I was to show up at a hotel or somewhere with my daughters, somebody asked them a question, they would answer, and they would tell you exactly what they thought. Whereas these other girls, if somebody asked them, they may look to their handler before they answer. There may be some behavioral oddities in there that things just aren't right. Malcolm McDowell wrote a book called Blink, and I thought that was a really good book. And it talks about our gut reactions when something just doesn't feel right, but oftentimes we'll just kind of write it off. Well, quite often, if you get that weird feeling that something's just not right here, maybe take a little bit more time and think about what you're looking at and think about what you're seeing or maybe not seeing that you should. There are informational pieces out here of things to look for. I see a lot of stuff where it says maybe they're suffering from malnutrition but quite honestly, physical appearance alone is generally not enough. because I've seen people being trafficked that were very healthy, good teeth, good hygiene and all that. I've seen people that were being trafficked. I've seen kids that were being trafficked that would be trafficked during their school lunch, and they would be back home that afternoon and in their own bed at night. So I don't want to give out some kind of easy button here or cookie cutter, but learn to observe your surroundings. Don't just see, but learn to observe and take things in, especially if you work somewhere in the public. That's one of the things that people should really read up on this and then trust your gut.
Yeah, and it's interesting as a society how quickly we write things off. I just interviewed a lady by the name of Mary Jo Ross, and she was part of a generational satanic cult and also trafficked within her family as well as that cult. And it's, growing up, it seemed like everybody knew, everybody knew at school that there was something wrong, but they wrote it off, or they picked on her, picked on the family rather than going, hey, something's wrong. Let's raise that flag and, as a community, do something about it. And that's a very extreme situation, of course. But yeah, it's crazy. I was telling you before the show, right, that even in foster care, looking back on it today, I never told my adopted parents this, I was actually, so I went into foster care before. I was with my adoptive parents, and then they were moving from Illinois to Iowa. And during that time period, they were trying to figure out how to adopt us and cross state lines as well, right? Because my dad got a different job. And so we went back into foster care for a little bit. And when we were in foster care, me and my older brother were at a house and watching soft porn. And I think about that today. And, just like what you were talking about with the sextortion, it's the same thing, right? I mean, I was feeling shame. I didn't want to tell anybody. It was something that I knew that I wasn't supposed to see. It seems like there's a lot more of it out there than what we give it credit for.
Yes.
So I tried to look up many times on, statistics for, how many of these different things are, how many people are trafficked out there, how many people are exploited, or, what have you. And it seems like I come up with different numbers every time.
You do.
Every time that I look.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm glad you brought up statistics, because I absolutely hate statistics. But if you go to, like, wherever you live, wherever you are right now, let's say you're traveling, wherever you are, you could probably go to the chief of police of that city or the sheriff of that county or whatever the legal structure is. Go to the head of that municipality or that agency and, ask them how many cars were stolen last month, or last week, how many break-ins did you have, how many residential burglaries, how many commercial burglaries. If you ask them about stuff, then they're going to be able to give you numbers. If you ask them how many kids were trafficked around here, no idea. How many kids are missing? Probably not going to be sure about that. How many foster kids are not where they're supposed to be right now in your jurisdiction? No clue. That, we measure what we value in our society. And I can tell you by what I see, we're not measuring kids. We're not measuring childhood. We're really not aware of it. We don't want to be aware of it because it's unpleasant. And when does this stuff become statistically significant? Is it one kid? Is one kid enough? Or is that a write-off? Are these throwaway kids? I keep hearing that term a lot. So if they're throwaway kids, how many throwaway kids does it take for this to be statistically significant? And the only answer that I've ever found in any of this is the only statistical significance is when it's your kid or some child that's within your bubble, your personal circles. That's when it really becomes statistically significant for most people. Because we don't, most of us, a lot of us don't live, that watch podcasts or listen to podcasts, probably don't live in poverty or where we see a lot of this happening. That's a whole population without a voice, and we have to talk about this. That's why what you do is important.
I appreciate that, Kevin. This term's got me deeply disturbed. This throwaway kids.
Good.
That's absolutely sickening that would even come out of anybody's mouth.
It does.
Mean, one should be plenty to get people fired up.
Yep, I think so.
But you also mentioned that, it's deeply disturbing, and that's why people choose to ignore it. And I'm not sure if that's the words that you used, but that's how I took it.
Right. That seems to be.
Yeah, I would agree. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's great that this movie came out recently, and I'm not a promoter for the movie, so leave people to that. But I am a promoter for the action, the action behind it and what you do and things like that. But I've talked a lot about it lately, and it seems like on social media I can post something up about going out and lifting weights or whatever, and I get 1,000 comments, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But I post something about this, and it's crickets all day long. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's
well, there's also this dispersion of responsibility. I don't know if you remember any social psychology, but is it Kitty Genovese saying that right?
I'll believe you.
So there's this bystander effect, essentially, that Kitty was a prostitute, and I believe it was in New York City, early part of the century, long ago, and she was killed within earshot. People were walking right by. She was attacked, and anyway, the concept was that if there are enough people that see something, and what's in everybody's mind is that, somebody else is going to do that. Somebody else will make the call. Somebody else will take care of that. And it's really unpleasant. I don't want to do it because I got to go to lunch, or I've got, I got a barbecue, whatever it is, whatever's in our life. We like our convenience and our leisure time, and it's really, really easy to say, "Oh, this is on social media. There's got to be 1 million people looking at that. Somebody's going to do something," and then we walk by. So this bystander effect that we see quite often.
Yeah, that's sickening to me that people think that way.
Yeah, so we've got to stop, and this is why, again, people like you, this is why this is important. Your listeners, we've got to get this across that it's not somebody else's problem. It's not somebody else's kids. These are all our kids. When I went over to Afghanistan in August of 21, we were trying to raise money to get there, and then to get psychologists over there and get to people. And I actually had some of the people saying, are these American kids? Are you going over there to help American kids, or what are you? And I'm not going to tell you my response, but they're kids, and we have to help them. Somebody has to. Somebody's got to say yes. Somebody's got to do that, and we can't allow this excuse anymore of somebody else is going to do that. We all have to take action and ownership.
Agree. So I guess that brings us right into it. How do people take action, Kevin? How does the common man or woman, who goes there 9 to 5, might be a school teacher or a lawyer, whatever. How do they get involved, and how can they make a difference?
Well, there are, I would say, many different ways, but let's say you don't have the skill set. You don't want to go traveling around trying to do things, which I get. That's really, really difficult. Donating money, donating time, show up at call your local youth shelter or someplace that deals with kids and volunteer your time to go read to a kid, or take them to a museum, spend some time with them. There are a group of, the term, and this is a horrible term, unadoptable boys that do nothing but sit in a shelter. And now some of these kids have been through hell and have had just a terrible, terrible life. So I wouldn't always recommend just going and taking them somewhere, because there's no telling how that would turn out, because there are behavioral issues. There are some other things just because of how these boys have grown up. But, some people going down and at least trying to spend time with them, doing it according to however the staff says is safe and acceptable, but at least showing them that people are there, that people care, that they are worth something. If you have a business, again, donating money is always great. Find a nonprofit somewhere and donate money and go that way. Make sure it's a nonprofit that's actually doing something, not one of these that talks about it and posts videos, but people that are actually out in the field doing stuff. Donating money, donating your time in whatever way that looks like, big brothers, big sisters, or whatever your skill set and abilities are. Paying attention to our legislation. So I was called into another country a few months ago. I can't get into too many specifics here. Called into another country where they had done, and this is a modern society. It's not a third world country by any means. They're very advanced, but they had allowed their privacy policies and laws to get to a certain extent where they arrested this guy who was posing as a 15-year-old boy who had gotten over 1,000 kids, mostly girls, but also some boys, to provide first generation to film themselves doing things and provide and send them to him. So he had all this material, first generation material, which is huge. And he also had been in contact with over 240 offenders, contact offenders, which means these are people on the child exploitation side that have access to children, that are abusing and raping those children, that are capturing that on video and images, and they are trading that, openly trading it. They had faces of these men, and they had faces of these children. They had exhausted all their resources, investigative capabilities, exhausted them. And in a lot of these cases, all we're left with are the faces of these. So you get probably two choices. You either have the face of a child rapist or the face of a child who's being raped and abused. Now, the government there said we cannot use facial recognition because that might violate somebody's rights. So the question is, whose rights are we protecting? We have videos that capture a man raping a child, and we are concerned with protecting that rapist's rights. And if we don't look carefully at the laws as they are written and enacted here in the U.S., we're going to run into the same thing. Like Illinois, for example, has passed a state law saying you can't use Clearview. Now, Clearview is the only tool out here that we can run children in. So basically what the state of Illinois said, well, if it is our kids, you can't run them in your database to find, we can't rescue them. It's just crazy that the way they've done that. And we're seeing that more and more and more because people are not paying attention. They're letting somebody else do the talking, and they're assuming that all these and don't get me wrong, I'm very pro privacy. I think you should protect your privacy. But if you're one of these people who if your face is out there in the wilds of the internet, if you're taking selfies of yourself, taking photos of what you eat every day, and your friends are posting you and all the crazy stuff you do with them, I don't think you really have that much expectation of privacy in that's sent out into the wilds. And Clearview only scrapes what is openly available. So I could actually go and sit down at a computer and search if I could actually search faces like that and find the same stuff that they've got in their database. They just triage it and do it faster, and quite honestly, they do it more effectively and efficiently. So that's another thing. We can pay attention to your privacy. What's being passed? How does it hamstring law enforcement? Because law enforcement has to hunt these predators where they hunt. And these predators and traffickers, so that the runaway loophole, if you've seen that video that I did, what we can consistently see are groomers or predators, traffickers are grooming our kids. Now, grooming is what, 20, 25 years ago might have been, the weird uncle is bringing me candy, want me to sit on his lap, or, there's gifts and there's attention and all of that goes on in the physical grooming. Well, the same type of thing happens using technology, and your kids can be groomed sitting right next to you on the way to school, right next to you or in the back seat. They can be groomed while they're sitting in their bedrooms playing on their Xbox or Nintendo, whatever it is. They can be groomed while using their library system at school. I've seen that too. So they can be groomed anywhere. And we have been telling parents this for well over a decade. Watch what you're doing. Watch what your kids are doing, because people are on there and they'll groom them. The next step we see is that these groomers, towards the end of it, well, they don't pull up in a white van in front of Walmart or the mall or somewhere and snatch your kid in and take off. Because as soon as that happens, you got helicopters flying overhead. Every federal agency in earshot is out. Everybody's swarming the area, and they don't want that. So if you look up, and I throw Phoenix under the bus, but I think Phoenix just said, hey, we're just going to put it out there. So Phoenix police runaway, if you Google those three terms and look at their policy, it says right there, running away is not a crime. It is the responsibility falls upon the parent or guardian of the child to find that child. They will take the child's information, put them into NCIC, and that's all their responsibility is. Now, all of this information is shared. You mentioned dark web. So on the dark web, there are anti-profiling manuals. There are manuals on OPSEC, operational security, for predators and traffickers and criminals and terrorists. They get all this information. They get it from podcasts, from news stories, from articles, from when detectives write up too much and the journalists go in and pull their search warrant return and say, oh, this is how they did that. And then they write it up. They take this intelligence and they package it up into these manuals that are online for predators and criminals to use. So having said that, groomers or the predators groom children, tell them to run away, because you got to make sure everybody knows you're running away. That way, society, we tend to blame the victim in this case. So the runaway, it's on them. They'll come back when they get done. And you'll often hear, that's foster kid or something's a throwaway kid. We're not going to spend any time on this. So that mentality has to change, because once these kids are out there on their own, they have no resources. They got no place to stay. They've got no food, no medicine. But once they're provided with a place to stay and food, well, you got to work. You got to pay your own way here. Sex trafficking, labor trafficking, organized retail crime. They'll send them out for to run shoplifting or gift card fraud, or they'll send them out to do something. And when they get caught and arrested, who gets in trouble? Well, it's the kids.
Yeah.
The kids are charged with the crime and prosecuted, and the predators and traffickers, they're safe. It wasn't them. They were just trying to help them out, give them a place to stay. So it creates that buffer and that barrier. So that's one of the things that we see a lot of.
Wow. It's just amazing to me how complex it really is behind the scenes, with the dark web and the manuals and things like that. So taking it a step deeper, Kevin, I'm a parent. I have 8 kids, one grandkid who's here, one on the way this week. It scares the hell out of me what you're talking about.
It should.
5 of my children are adults now, and I got 3 little ones. I got a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. How do I protect them? What do I do as a parent to, keep them from these different things, trafficking, exploitation, sextortion, these atrocities of evil?
Yeah. I think one of the things you could do is to talk to people like Hannah George with Filter First. She has done a tremendous job of gathering up a lot of information to provide training for teachers and parents. But for me personally, we tend to focus on these things. And when the parent and the child is focused on this, it's, nobody's focusing on this relationship. And I think the relationship is going to be the most powerful thing that can protect these kids. I've been contacted. Well, I was contacted yesterday by a trooper, I won't say the state, but a trooper who lost his nephew to sextortion. He committed suicide. And there was another trooper in Mississippi. I know he's put his story out. He lost his son to sextortion. He committed suicide. So, this is really, 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 really important that we get this. And I'm not saying anything about these troopers, because, these kids are so traumatized and they feel so helpless and alone that, we have to work on our relationships. I can't tell you how, but because every kid's different. My oldest daughter, I got an older son, then my oldest daughter, and I got my younger daughter. And all three of them, I have different relationships with. They're different people. There's different personalities. Even growing up, they were different. So you can't really throw a cookie cutter on this and say, I would have to do the same one with each. So one of the things we do see with the people who are grooming our kids, and I've got hundreds of thousands of pages of this, what we see is that they will, first of all, try to friend your child on social media. And once they're friended, they'll start off conversations. Hey, what do you like to travel, or how's school going? What do you like to do? And what kind of food do you like? And they actually listen. They actually listen. And then they give that response back after listening. They give a response back. They kind of mirror and label and do some of the things. And they get to a point where this illusion of trust builds up. Because there's that, it's kind of like a therapist-client relationship where you have the transference. You heard that term?
Yeah.
Where there's this illusion of a relationship and of an attraction. It's kind of the same thing that we create over there. And what do we do as parents? And also, I'll say the groomers, they're looking for depression, anxiety, eating disorder, suicidal ideation. They're looking for problems, because that's where they can really slide in and support that kid and turn them more against that parent. So they're looking for that gap they can slide into. So this grooming process happens just because these people are so good at listening, giving feedback, asking questions, and being supportive. That's not always possible as a parent, with a child. Not always possible. I'm not saying it is. But we have to do better. And we have to communicate to our children that no matter how bad you screw up, you can come to me and you can tell me, and we'll fix it. We'll figure this out, and it doesn't matter what it is, because they're going to screw up.
Oh, for sure.
I'm 55 and I'm still screwing up. There's still so much I don't know that I'm screwing up. We can't expect our kids, especially at that age, to be perfect. It's not going to happen. But we don't often convey that message, because all we tell them is, you've got to make perfect grades. You've got to get a job, or whatever it is, which we have to do as parents, because we want them to be responsible adults. So the way I usually look at this is, how do you teach your kids how to drive? Maybe we start off, like for me, I start off in a parking lot, something super easy, get a few times out there until I'm really confident that they can do okay. Maybe we'll go out on a side road with no traffic, take that for a little while until they're comfortable. Then maybe we'll go up to a highway, a little bit of, a little more traffic, maybe a stop sign, stoplight. And if they do something stupid, or not stupid, but if they screw up and stress out, maybe we take it back down a notch. But each time they gain that trust, we go a little further. We don't take them back unless we need to. And I think we got to do the same thing with technology, because what I see consistently are that, parents, if you're going to use spyware, and we should monitor, especially if you're going to give, 8, 9, 10-year-olds a cell phone, you got to monitor that stuff. You got to know what's going on. And that stuff, the predators can hit hard and fast. Even if you catch it, you may have some damage you've got to figure out how to undo. But when you get up to a kid who's 13, 14, 15, especially 16 and 17, and you're still taking their phone and you're looking through it and you're putting spyware on it, I think that's going to backfire on you. I think if they're at that level and you haven't developed that trust in their capabilities and you haven't trained them, like password manager or password hygiene, how to use a password manager. Most adults don't even know how to do that. Yet in our modern society, we should be training our kids how to use a password manager and about password hygiene. That alone can solve probably 95% of the problems out here on people accessing our stuff. But there's so much. I could go on and on about this. There's so much to do. But build that relationship and build that trust is the big thing.
Yeah, and it is definitely tough. I remember when my older kids were, into cell phones and what have you. They would get grounded from them. We'd overreact to something. They'd get grounded from them. All of a sudden, we'd find another one in their sock drawer or whatever, right? I mean, they're gonna find a way.
Right.
I find it sickening but intriguing as well how you mentioned that they target eating disorders or depression or what have you as a way in as well. So we need to really balance that with our children as well. They're all individuals, like you said.
Right.
But we probably need to pay more attention to those ones with those.
Increased vulnerability, I think. It's
right.
something extra there that really, all kids now, I think technology increases stress, increases anxiety. It does in adults too. When's the last time you were bored? We're constantly, everywhere you are, you're sitting around looking at this thing, and you've constantly got some feedback. You got this thing going in your brain, and our kids have never known anything else. And it's just something. Maybe we do need to get rid of those cell phones for a while. Maybe take a few days off and have a break. But
it's definitely tough. I know as parents, we tried to hold off as long as possible. And, then of course we were the bad parents because we didn't allow them any freedoms. And, we never did really find that balance. Now these three were homeschooling, so they don't know what balance is.
Right. Yeah.
They just know that life. But, my other kids going to public school, these other kids were getting cell phones when they were, like you said, 8 or 9. And, they always had them in their hands, and, they were playing games and texting back and forth. And, my kids were like, you guys don't want us to have a life.
Right. Yeah. They don't understand. Not at all.
Yeah. So it's interesting, focusing on that relationship when you're also dealing with just normal kid stuff, right? They need to be around friends, but friends interact so much differently nowadays than what they used to when we were kids.
Right. And, there's also, there are also other dynamics. Like you'll see predators saying, "Oh, you're so beautiful. You're so pretty." But then you also see the father, the parent saying, "Oh, you're a beautiful young girl." And that does not carry the same weight because, one of the kids is going to say, "That's my dad. He's supposed to say that." So, we kind of have things stacked against us in a lot of ways. We have to overcome, but the effort we still have to put that effort in. We actually have to do it. And not only that, we have to adopt everybody else's kid, essentially, that we got to keep an eye out. Barbara Jean Wilson, if you're on social media, look up Barbara Jean Wilson. She's now in her probably late 60s. She lives up in the Northeast, but she grew up and was trafficked by her own mom starting at the age of 8. And she was talking about how her behaviors changed. So if you see any other kids who have sudden behavioral changes, if your kids, we got to talk to our kids too, that we have a responsibility to other people. And that's not something you hear a lot of nowadays. That we should watch out for our I don't want to say friends, but you watch out for other people because they may need help and they don't have a way to ask for it. But she would talk about as 3 o'clock, the end of her school day would approach. Sometimes she would have accidents, and this was after the abuse started, after her mom started trafficking her. And she said she was a good student, no problems, no behavioral issues, and then suddenly at school she was in trouble, and then she was having accidents because. If you know anything about going in combat or going into anything, it's not uncommon for your body just to release everything. It's that fight or flight, that stress mechanism.
Right.
And essentially what she was doing, she was getting ready to go into this horrible situation, and her body knew it. And it was just, releasing everything. And then she also said one time she did run away. Her mom showed up with a police officer to go get her. So then how much trust do you think she had in police officers?
0.
Yeah, and that's another aspect we have to think about when we're dealing with these other kids that don't have parents who do care about them.
Right.
So there's a lot of dynamics here that good parents probably have never. I mean, this stuff has probably never crossed their mind. If you're a really good parent and you've never been around any of this in your life, you're probably listening to this like this is some foreign, crazy information.
Well, for those people thinking that right now, Kevin, just, from your background, how many states in the United States have you dealt with this in?
All of them. Even Hawaii.
Even Hawaii. And has any city been immune to it?
Nope. There is nowhere in the world that is immune to this.
Yeah, small towns, they're on the radar.
Yep.
Um, Blast
Afghanistan.
systems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean it hits everywhere. Nobody's immune. We all need to be listening to this. We all need to open our eyes.
We do, and we have to save childhood now because Barbara, I remember her saying that her childhood ended when she was 8 because that's when the abuse started, and that was the end of her childhood. Can you imagine losing your childhood at the age of 8? What's it going to be like if we have a generation of kids that grow up without childhood, or a large chunk of them never experienced childhood? What's the economic impact? What's the impact of the relationships with other people, with our society? What's going to happen with that? And the only time we can save it is right now. We can't wait till next year or next month or later. It's got to be now.
Oh, agreed, 100%. And it's, you look at these, preteens and teenagers, and all of the issues that are targeted that you mentioned, all are on the rise.
Yes.
Every single last one of them.
Right.
So that just makes it even more of a open playground for all these predators and different people trying to make a buck off from doing these atrocities.
Right. Absolutely.
So hopefully we open some eyes here, Kevin. I mean, I know you did with me. There's a lot more to this that I certainly didn't know. Probably the one that gets me the most, and probably the thing that I think my family would have the most vulnerability in, is this sextortion. I can't get that word out of my mouth to save my life. Would you say that that's a reasonable assumption?
Sextortion is a huge, huge threat. I've seen it hit families, good families, that never saw it coming. It's on the forefront of, when I was at Interpol in France in March, this was being actively talked about. When I was in Australia for the Crimes Against Children conference down there, it was being talked about. It's an international concern, and we see a lot of this, the money going back to the Ivory Coast, Nigeria. My team has helped track a couple of sextortionists back to Pakistan that were responsible for a girl killing herself in New York right before her graduation. So they're reaching into our country, they're reaching into our communities and they're organized. So, and it's other places in the world, and parents have to do something, have to be aware of this.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there looking down this list of what you talked about, and as long as I'm around my kids, a lot of these things, they could happen. Don't get me wrong. I'm not immune to, but I'm a 6'3", 240-pound guy.
Hey, right. We're the same then.
What's that?
I said we're the same then. That's exactly where I'm at. So I fully understand.
So there's some of these things that they're not going to try and snatch a kid while the kid's in my arms, right?
No, but they don't have
coming in the back door with this extortion of children and things like that. That's where my real vulnerability lies, I believe.
Yes, that's where everybody's vulnerability lies. Yeah, and especially guys like us. We're used to being, we're 6'3", 240. We're pretty dominant. There are bigger people than us out here, but not a lot. And so we develop that mentality, and then we get blindsided by somebody sneaking in and hitting our kids, on their phone while they're in the back seat and we're driving them to school, and that's where it happens.
Right. Well, dang, man, I got to take about 10 deep breaths after we get off from here. But so just to kind of wrap this up, as parents, we really need to build those strong relationship with our kids. We cannot have these walls of defense mechanisms that go up that allow us to ruin those relationships. We need to be open to that communication, allowing them to bring their mistakes to us, and us being the ones that help correct them. Otherwise, someone else can creep in.
Right.
As out in the community, we really can, focus on donating time and money to different organizations and really get involved in the legislation of our country,
Right.
especially with hunting down these predators,
Mhm.
as well as taking a look at it from the aspect of runaway versus someone who's been kidnapped, for
Right.
example. If someone does want to donate some of their time and money, how can they help you out, Kevin?
Well, I'm currently with Sentinel, and we're doing a lot of work. I'll actually be in Thailand here in a few weeks, working with law enforcement there to actually execute search warrants and arrests. I mean, the Thai police are going to be doing all the work, but we're going to be all as advisors and helping them with the investigation. So foundationsentinel.org is a great place.
And they can hit a donate button there and
Yes.
give to the cause.
Yep.
And that would go towards travel and expenses and those sorts of things.
Yeah, we have other donors that are handling a lot of the overhead. So what we look for are the donations going straight into operational support. Actual
Right.
things that will end up in either people in handcuffs or victims getting some sort of services and help.
So direct action for sure.
Yes.
With donations.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. So sentinelfoundation.org.
Foundationsentinel.org is the way they've got it. Yeah.
You'd think I'd be better at this. My wife's a dyslexia specialist.
Well, it is it seems backwards, but it's foundationsentinel.org. That's it. Yeah.
Foundationsentinel.org.
That's it.
All right. And I'll make sure that gets in the show notes as well. This has been absolutely phenomenal, Kevin. It's been a pleasure meeting you here, sir. Really appreciate you giving this audience all of that background and information, and especially the tips on how to protect their own children. So once again, sir, I thank you and appreciate you being here on the Fire Forge Leader podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on and helping me get the word out.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and hit this end button. But once again, thank you, sir. And we'll see you next time on the Fire Forge Leader.
Thank you.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.